and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai, an American living in Japan for 20 years. I've gone through some massive life changes and crises in my 20 years here. At its bleakest, I felt very isolated, alone, and helpless in the face of what was happening. I relied on alcohol and cigarettes to get through it the best I knew how, which worked until it didn't, and everything fell apart. I made it through with a little help from my friends, a fledgling mindfulness practice, and learning how to become my own strongest ally. I quit drinking and smoking, worked my way through my grief, found ways to forgive, created new connections, and started a regular exercise, meditation, and self-care routine. I've also become a national board certified health and wellness coach along the way, and developed a desire and passion to help others on their own personal journeys. This podcast is all about change, growth, healing yourself, learning how to get back up after life kicks you down, and exploring mindfulness and self-compassion as incredible tools available to each and every one of us to do just that. Hello, and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai. And today's episode is actually a revenge recording session for me. I spent an entire morning talking into my laptop, as I do here, recording this brilliant, kind of deep, kind of out there podcast episode all about ego, basically. And when I was finished and I went to start editing it, I discovered that I had not turned the microphone switch on. And of course, I was completely disappointed and frustrated, but I ended up having to just laugh and shake my head and say, yes, thank you for the lesson in humility and the irony of talking all about ego and other people's egos. And then I just completely made a mistake and I did not turn the microphone on. And so all of this ranting and rambling about egos and them getting in our way prevented me from doing the thing that I intended to do. So I share that as a means of explanation and also as the honest to goodness truth and the opening of this episode, in which I am going to attempt to kind of recreate at least some of that discussion. And of course, things have changed and evolved since then. It was also extra laughable and annoying because it was April 1st. And I thought, this is my April Fool's joke from the universe. So point taken. Thanks. I got it. What I do want to talk about today is, though, not just ego and kind of wander down some of those rabbit holes. Where I came from and what I started with was this tension between my own personal journey and path and awakening of the heart, softening and letting go and doing my best to open up into life and the mystery and the miracle that it is. And that meaning that I am being brave and courageous enough to take risks, be vulnerable, put myself out there in various ways, whether that's professionally through my podcast and my writing, my work with customers, or whether that's personally in other ways, reaching out, trying to make new connections, meet new people, get closer. But there's a lot of vulnerability in sharing my authentic self and being who I really am and being brave enough to allow others to see that. That means that sometimes it's not always going to be well received. It's not always going to be accepted. It's not always going to be reciprocated. everyone is coming at life and at relationships with their own egos and their own stuff. And so I have had a few experiences in recent weeks and months where I felt like I was trying to do that, follow where my intention is taking me and try to lead with my heart and be honest and open and vulnerable, and also take care of myself, right? Speak up when I am hurt by things or when I feel like I need to convey some kind of either boundary being pushed or broken, or just, when things don't sit right with me. I don't want to just absorb and take on everybody else's stuff. I also need to have a strong back. Lead with a soft heart, a soft front, but also have a strong back. And in those few actual interactions with other people, with their own egos and with their own things, I didn't feel like my ego was being met where I needed it to be met. They had their own stuff, and I chose to kind of let things go because I couldn't see the path forward. Now, I will pause here to say again, the irony is not lost on me that I'm going to sit here and talk about ego from my own ego. Our egos are not necessarily bad. They kind of get a bad rap, and I think a lot of that has to do with whatever definition or meaning that you're assigning to it. But I think of it as just what makes us us. It's our personalities, and our personalities are partially formed from our histories and our lived experiences and the culture and society that we grow up in, our family systems, all of these different things that make us our unique individual us is what the ego is. The ego is also trying to protect us and take care of us. And this is where some of that, I think, negative connotation can come from, where if our egos are always right, if we are always the one that is right and no one else is ever wrong, you can see where this leads to problems, because there are 8 billion of us on the planet right now. So we can't all be right. Our egos are there to take care of us and protect us and run the show. And they are very, very helpful and useful, and they do all of these wonderful things. But they can also impede us and trip us up if we're not able to recognize what is happening when it is happening. And so for me, and these interactions that I have spent a lot of time thinking about and really wanting to find a way through and to the other side, to some kind of reconnection or repair, or like just simply a path through to the other side, instead of just letting it dissolve or fade away, which is not what I would like to do. I felt that perhaps the other individuals' egos were kind of impeding that progress, that they had a very different view of what occurred. And of course, I had a very different view of what occurred. But my ego was wanting an acknowledgement and also an apology that a mistake was made, that simply they did something wrong, even if it was unintentional, even if it was not personal, just simply that was a mistake. And that made my ego feel sad or hurt or surprised or shocked or whatever it was. And so I am sorry that happened. I think that is what I was looking for and hoping for, but that is not what the other party was willing to do. So that has sat with me and stuck with me, because the other side of the tension, the one half was me trying to be vulnerable and open-hearted and make new connections and find my tribe and create community, because I really truly believe that that is what we need more than ever right now. We need each other. We need connection with ourselves, with each other, with the universe, with the planet. And so I really feel strongly about trying to do that, to create spaces for those different kinds of connections within, without, with everything. And so it's extra baffling or extra just sad, I guess, that when I made that kind of effort, then it's thwarted, is what it feels like to my ego. So this gets me to this bigger tension, and this conversation has come up in so many different ways, in so many different spaces, with so many different people over the past few years of my life, that I think we need community. The need is there. We need connection. We need each other. But it's almost like the desire isn't. I think after COVID and our online technological lives has changed the landscape drastically, right? It's very, very easy to stay home, to stay to yourself. Maybe you go online, but maybe you don't even engage. Maybe you engage and you're hitting a whole bunch of other egos or bots that you don't really want to engage with. I understand that tendency or that drive to just kind of stay within, even if it's not just an individual withinness, but within your own established unit. That might be just one person. That might be your solo unit. That might be your immediate family. That might be your established zones of influence. But I understand this very strong pull to not be vulnerable, to not take risks, to not reach out. But then we hit that tension again. If all of us are just staying closed up in our own little bubble, how are we going to forge the connections and create the community that is what is going to get us through this remarkable, messed up, surreal time in the history of the planet that we find ourselves? So I've been wrestling with this idea of community and connection, and how, in kind of broader terms, like on paper, it looks really good and it sounds really good to say we need connection, we need community. That is what is going to get us through. We need to take care of each other as humans and as living beings, including the planet. But when it comes down to the actual practical lived experience, as I have recently discovered, our egos very often get in the way, right? How do we come together and see each other and see that there is so much more that unites us than separates us, and see our egos for what they are, our baggage and our packaging, and also all of the things that make us unique and different and exciting. It's not simply a bad thing, but to see when our egos need to take a step back and when they can lead the way. So again, in a little lesson from the universe, my latest newsletter also went up today, and I wrote that a little while ago, and rereading it this morning, I was reminded of this part of my ego, this wanting to be in control and take charge and get stuff done and kind of skip ahead to the next thing before the current thing is even finished kind of tendency in my mind, because that has served me very well throughout my life and in the past. It's a very, very strong tendency of mine. And I was writing about in that newsletter how I had absolutely nothing to do, no pressing engagements or appointments or even tasks on my calendar that day. And yet the entire morning, as I was getting myself and my children ready, I had that time pressure pushing me, like, hurry, hurry, hurry. It's already that time and you got to do this, that, and the other. I think a lot of us, especially living in the modern day, maybe particularly mothers of particularly small children, can find that very relatable and identifiable. The like, we have to do this because now we have to get to the next thing. And it's just this endless chain of events every single day until you pass out at the end of the night and wake up and do it all over again. And when you hear it described in that way, you hear how busy and rushed and not present and not pleasant that existence sounds. And I was really struck that morning. I finally caught myself when we were backing out of the parking spot. And I literally said to myself, whispered in my own mind, it's okay. You are okay. There is nothing wrong. There's literally not even any rush. Just breathe. It's all okay. And that's what our egos are hiding or obscuring from our hearts and our souls and our systems so much of the time. Whether it's that sense of time pressure and pushing, you have to go, whether it's any number of shoulds or not enoughs that our histories or our patterns or our thinking grooves in our mind have made over our lifetimes. There's so many different things and stories that our egos continue to tell us long after the fact that they are relevant or helpful. Again, I think so much of this comes from when we were young and what we learned to do to give ourselves a sense of safety or protection, love, belonging, right? So all these different things that we learned as young children how to do to navigate the complexities and the scary reality of life, we carry forward, and they might not be helpful anymore. Just like this go, overachieving perfectionist control freak part of me wants to continue to exert her influence. Sometimes that's great. She was very helpful yesterday morning when I did have to get out of the house very early and I needed to go downtown and I had clocks a ticking. I let her take over then. But she doesn't need to be there all the time. And I myself am trying to navigate recognizing when those old habits or those old thought patterns are rearing their ugly head and popping up and automatically taking over. For me, this is what my mindfulness practice is all about. Being able to just have a little bit of space around that when I need it, so I can take that step back. I can take those few deeper breaths, and I can simply see things a little bit more clearly and be a little bit more aware of what is actually happening. I'm never going to be completely unbiased or out of my ego or my body. I'm not an enlightened being or one with the universe as I am in this physical human finite form. So I'm always going to have a little bit of the essence of me clinging to everything that I think and do. But the more that I can recognize that that's what's happening, the more that I can step back and say, why am I having that reaction? Why is that setting me off in that way? The more I can bring curiosity and kindness to these difficult moments, the better I am able to not respond automatically. the better I'm able to just provide myself with a little bit of cushion to choose my reactions. And I personally think the more that all of us individually could do that, the better the world would be. Perhaps the easier it would be to create connections and community. And maybe this is a huge part of what being human is learning how to bounce around and interact with all these other egos that are all having their own stories and their own histories and their own preferences and ways of living and doing, and finding the ways to come together and see past the ego and to touch into something deeper and just say, you too are another living being that wants all the same things I do. You want to be happy. You want to feel loved. You want to be accepted. You want to feel safe. You care about your children. We, at our purest essence, want the same things, and the same things hurt us, and the same things make us suffer. And so I guess this brings me back to my tension of, how do we forge connection and community in a real way? How do we do it in a practical way and not just as something that sounds good or something that we read about in books or see in other places outside of ourselves? As this is the second time that I am attempting to record the thoughts that have been swirling around in my head about all of this, I think I did a much better job this time to really ground the conversation in what has actually just been happening for me. I had a couple of interactions that kind of surprised me and shocked me and disappointed me and just made me sad, because I thought I had found new people. I thought I had found new tribe members that it turns out maybe aren't. Or maybe this is just a hiccup or a blip, a spot in our path that might change. But it really gave me pause, and it really made me reflect on that tension between building connection, building community, and then how do we actually really do it? So here I am trying to do the things that I am saying, and yet it's not working. What do I do with that? I think some other things were happening in the past few weeks in my life that also made me be thinking about these things, and a couple of them I want to share here. So pardon the language, but one of them is the 3 asshole rule. I don't know if you're familiar or not, but the 3 asshole rule, as I have learned it, is if you run into 3 assholes in the same day, perhaps it's you who is the asshole. And if you think about this, it really makes a lot of sense. When you are stressed out or frustrated or have a lack of sleep or are hungry and, have low blood sugar, whenever you are kind of struggling or not at your best, that is when everything goes wrong, right? That's when the person at the supermarket is rude and someone in traffic cuts you off and your kids aren't listening to you and your boss gives you a hard time. It's usually you having a hard time if every single person and every single thing is off. Maybe it's time for you to pause and reflect. Is it me? Is it something going on with me that's making me extra sensitive or extra grumpy or extra frustrated? I asked myself this question: am I the sensitive asshole? Have I been living in a kind of, old-fashioned world? Do I have too demanding of expectations. Honestly, it's given me pause for my own self-reflection. Is this me? Is this something that I need to change or think about or reflect on? So there's that, because I think it's our egos that are so desperately trying to cling to the fact that we can't possibly be wrong. It is me. It is I. I am the center of the universe. That is what our ego is trying to say to us, right? I am right. What I am trying to do is correct. There is no other alternative. And obviously that is not always the case. So trying to pop out of that and just widen your perspective and think about it a little bit more, be a little bit more mindful and aware of what stories you could be telling yourself, what protective, defensive coping mechanisms your ego might be throwing out there to try and deal with whatever's happening. Just bringing some more self-awareness and reflection into our interactions, because we can't always all be right. The other thing that I just want to share and really emphasize and highlight and keep in mind is that we all have a judge. We all have the judge in our mind. It's judging ourselves, and it's also making judgments on everything that's happening to us and on other people and situations. In Buddhism, they talk about these three basic states. We are either desiring or rejecting, or it's neutral. And so we're constantly doing this. And things are actually simply neutral. Circumstances are neutral. What changes is our response and our reaction and our feelings towards it. It's not you. It's not me. There's nothing wrong with us. This is just what we do. But again, this is why things like mindfulness and meditation and creating that understanding and that space for a little bit more awareness when it happens, to be able to catch ourselves in it, is where we have true freedom, and to be able to respond a little bit more skillfully from that place of awareness and perhaps more understanding, instead of just automatically knee-jerk reacting to everything that's happening in our lives. And the other part of that is that we have such a shame and blame culture, especially in the West. The cultures that I have grown up in and live in, the United States and Japan, we just have a really messed up idea that if we shame and blame and punish people, somehow that's going to make it better. Look at the United States criminal justice system. It's not working. Like, whatever that is, it's not working. It's very racist, and I won't go into all of the things that I think are wrong with the American criminal justice system. But it is based on this erroneous idea that if we shame and blame and punish people, that somehow that's going to make them better. And just hearing that out loud, to me, it just sounds so ridiculous. I think that's how so many generations of us were raised. If we shame and blame and punish our children, somehow that's going to make them better. And with children, because of the power dynamic, they have no choice. They might change their behavior in the short term, but how is that actually going to play out in the future? How does your child feel if they internalize and just learn shame and blame and punishment? We have these cycles that continue on and on and on. So I wanted to highlight those kind of tangential parts to all of this that I've also been thinking about. I also recently was reading about the drama triangle. And it's a psychological term. It came up in the book that I'm currently reading. Briefly, it just highlights how in most interactions, we take on or assign others one of three roles: the persecutor and the victim and the rescuer. So even in the same interaction within the same person, we rotate in and out of these roles. And you can think about it in a really basic example of like a family, right? With a mom and a dad and a kid. Maybe the dad is strict and yelling at the kid because he did something wrong. So the dad's the persecutor and the kid's the victim. Then the mom steps in and she wants to be the rescuer. But then the kid feels sorry for the mom and he attacks the dad. So now those roles have flipped, right? And you can just see how it perpetuates itself on and on and on. I've been thinking about that as well, because I think that that is, again, our egos taking on this, I can't ever be wrong. It's really important that I'm always right. And both the persecutor and the rescuer also basically kind of resolve into the victim. The dynamics and the things that they do basically are just trying to protect them from not feeling like the victim. So basically, all of us just don't want to feel like the victim. We want to be right, and we want to be heard, and we want to be accepted, and we want to be loved. And again, that is what all of us human beings want at the soul level. It's just that our egos get in the way and kind of trip us up and prevent us from seeing that, and prevent us from hearing each other and speaking to each other at this heart level a lot of the times. So for today's takeaway, I will leave you with this incredibly difficult but potentially powerful exercise from the book that I'm reading. And I encourage you to sit down and take 3 pieces of paper and write down the persecutor, the rescuer, and the victim at the top of each one. And think about different situations in your life, or maybe different relationships or interactions with other people, where you have fit into each of those roles. Perhaps Google the drama triangle and get a little bit more background about it if you'd like. The point is that none of them are good and all of them are bad. If we're going to assign good and bad to them, none of that's helpful. That doesn't fix the problem. That doesn't actually help anything. It just perpetuates endlessly, and nothing ever really gets truly resolved from that place. So here's a great ego dissolving, or maybe just ego awareness building exercise for you. Where and how do you take on those roles in your life? I'm always curious to hear how this lands with my listeners. If anything interesting comes up in trying the takeaway and maybe just listening to this episode, please feel free to reach out. You can find my email address, and you can always send me a DM via my social media pages. All of that info is in the show notes. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm always happy to hop on a completely free discovery call and just chat and hear what's coming up for listeners. So thank you so much for joining me again today and listening if you got this far. Until next time, take care.